I never stopped thinking about doing DIY spaces. I continually to this day drive past the warehouse and think of its potential.
The Miracle House seems like it's something that lasted a decade. It's like an era for us.
So I made two things happen getting us shut down.
In the 1980s, Brian Talbert started making music with people from the Other Mothers, a band from Greensboro, North Carolina. At the time, Brian was an auto mechanic.
I just fell into a group of guys, called the Other Mothers, and I hung out with those guys a lot. Started playing music. The sound guy for the Other Mothers, he decided to start playing bass, and I said, well, I'll play the drum. We got a kick drum, a snare, and a hi-hat, and started playing. He's writing songs. Next thing, a guitar player from the Other Mothers joins us, and then next thing you know, the police are coming over to our house because we're playing too damn loud. And this went on for about a year. Because keep in mind, there was nothing going on in Greensboro. It was like 1987, late 86, and this place was a ghetto, man. It was boarded up buildings, nothing. We all decided, hey, there's this shithole of a warehouse downtown. Why don't we just rent that and practice out of that? People just started showing up as we were playing, and next thing you know, it'd be 30 or 40 people in the place.
Through the Greensboro music scene, Brian had come to know Jonathan McLean, a performance artist, sculptor, and musician.
I went to play a show downtown at a place called the Miracle House. It's a church on the corner. It's a regular old building from like the 20s or 30s, and on the corner of Linden Street and Market Street on the east side of town. And it used to be a church, so you'd go in and there were nice wood pews in this raw space, and the sign out front had been painted very crudely, Miracle House of Deliverance, and he had just spray painted through Deliverance and wrote "of rock" next to it. So it was just perfect.
He lived in another place just around the corner from me called the Doo-Doo House.
Greg came to know Jonathan by playing music at his home.
John and some friends had a house on Spring Street that was so deeply stuccoed that it looked like it was made out of turds. So we called it the Doo-Doo House. And
they were playing out of there, and next thing you know, it'd be a Friday night, and he'd have 30 people over here, I'd have 30 people over here, and I said, well, wouldn't it be better to have 100 people in one spot?
We got that one little space with Brian, and we were like, this is pretty cool. We can have a couple bands practice here. We can have some shows on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But John immediately thought bigger.
And then it's right on the cusp, right during the war in Kuwait, and everybody was being shipped out.
The person renting the rest of the warehouse was in the Army Reserve and was sent to fight in the Gulf War. This opened up an enormous new space.
We rented it from a slumlord who just didn't give a shit about the place. We eventually opened up the 5,000 square foot section, and all in all, I remember like a $1,200 bill on the whole place a month. We had 8 people living in this place in individual apartments and that we had built inside the warehouse.
And then the large warehouse space, we built a couple of quarter pipes, we built a massive stage.
And it was the New Year's Eve of 1990, 91, that we opened up the other side and officially changed it all back to Miracle House.
It was just a post-punk era place for everybody to come and hang out.
Our thing was anybody could come. It didn't matter who you were, the punks, the metalheads, the deadheads, the hippies, the goth, preppy people, frat boys, sorority girls. It didn't matter. We only had one rule: don't fuck up.
Hobnobbing at a Miracle House, hey!
The great thing about the Miracle House was you could do anything you wanted to do there, as long as you weren't fucking with anybody.
I mean, and people who messed up were actually looking for trouble, and I won't get into all of that, but there was a lot going on.
Get that goddamn moped out of here, motherfucker!
There was a lot of destruction in that time.
We just stayed active, and we were kind of like Jackass before Jackass was around. But during shows, we'd actually go around and actively collect TVs. You put the TVs in front of the stage. In the middle of the show, TVs, like half of them would work. The band would be playing, and you just go up and smash the TV, and it would just get the band going, even if they weren't expecting it.
I brought my TV down to get repaired. Look what happened. I feel so stupid.
But it became known as like, you don't know what's going to happen during a show at this place. We cut Volkswagen vans in half during shows. We cut up, we had a Coke machine, and one night we just got tired of it and cut it in half in a show. And we don't, who knows why we did that, but it was kind of just because we could do it. And it actually added to the whole thing about the space. People came in and knew this as a space where it was just wide open.
And I was thinking about this because this is really about creating. And I don't know why, but somehow the destruction felt like creativity too.
To me, it was the essence of DIY and a big fuck you to like, look, we can't do this shit. And we did a bunch of crazy, stupid shit. And luckily, nobody got hurt.
I say let it go. Come on!
Nobody died.
Destruction and original music wasn't helping the Miracle House grow. In order to bring more people into the space, Jonathan and Brian began hosting different events.
Outer space.
We created this thing called the Poet's Eat, where one of our friends who was a very good poet and writer, Evan Smith, asked if he could do it. We were like, sure, let's do it.
A series where people that read poetry would get to eat, free food. And we went with it and all that. I never imagined that people would actually bring their own food. I'm very thrilled.
It was poetry, but it was also kind of an open mic.
The window is broken, so the only thing that keeps her out is 2 words I'm too afraid to speak.
Donald Trump's a national hero until he goes under. Sorry, piece of shit.
We had some really funny people. In fact, Brian Huskey would come to the Poet's Eat.
My next guest tonight is a very funny actor and comedian you've seen in Veep, Children's Hospital, and Mr. Neighbor's House. Please welcome Brian Huskey.
Good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the Coffee Cup. We're wishful thinking, and tonight we're going to do a little bit of special music for you.
And he would come do comedy with another guy named Joe Ventura.
Just like me, I am just like me, you. Don't do this to me on stage, don't do this to me on stage, don't do this to me on stage, do not do this to me on stage. No, Joe, stop, Joe!
It really started to get other people to come down there. It's also at the heyday of the raves, and a fellow in town named Ed LeBrun, who owned the CD store called Spins, started booking, and he was a DJ, started booking major DJs on the rave circuit.
For a show where you've got 3 or 4 bands performing original music, you charge $3, and you still get people complaining about paying $3 because they want to spend it on beer instead of bands. You have a dance night where there's a DJ spinning records, you could charge $10 a head and nobody said a word.
So we'd start with 2 bands, and about the time they were finished, around 1 o'clock, I handled all the PA and sound and tech stuff. We'd be sneaking around in the back, getting the DJ ready to go. So as soon as the band hit that last note, everybody's clapping, the DJs would start up. And then the hundreds of more people would come in, and everybody would stay until the sun came up to the DJ. And we made a lot of money doing that, and it kept the place going.
John was investing in what we could do in that space. He wasn't using it as a money-making venture. Well, the money went back into the space every time. The most money we spent on stuff was at the end of a big rave, there'd be a mountain of money on the coffee table, and we'd grab a handful of it and go to Waffle House.
I know bands to raves was really unique, because that was the beginning of all the rave scene. And Maybe they were doing that in New York or Atlanta, but I'm pretty sure the bands had their spaces and the raves had their spaces, or there was a pretty clean-cut line between the two, but they're very distinctly different communities. They were blending, but I think it brought a lot more of us together, and I think that's what it represented to us the most.
So what do you think, man? It's fucking killer, man. The lights are awesome. The people are really cool. Yeah, no fights, nothing, man. It's pretty sweet.
With shows, poetry, and raves going on, the Miracle House became a well-known place in Greensboro.
I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it.
Well, at its peak was when we had the rhythm of bands coming in. We actually had got people booking bands for us.
A girl that hung out with us wanted to have a benefit for the Rape Crisis Center, so she booked Fugazi.
That was kind of like a high watermark for the Miracle House.
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out and tell you that your money is going to a wonderful cause. It's going to the Turning Point Rape Crisis Prevention Center and all that. What? Thank you. And I'd like to thank Brian and John and Steven and Tracy and everybody else out here at the Miracle House for letting us use their facilities.
When you tell people about this, either they know who Fugazi is and their jaw drops, or they have no idea who Fugazi is and it's a meaningless story. But, you know, at the time, they were like the biggest band in the world to a lot of us.
Fugazi was a fiercely independent and influential band during the 90s. Their frontman, Ian MacKaye, is also known for his role as a lead singer in Minor Threat. Currently, they have sold over 2 million albums.
That's nice. John, there's a guy in the swing. Watch out. This is a nice place. Enjoy yourselves.
And again, I didn't want to mess around, so I got the place in town, Audio and Light, who I was renting equipment from and eventually working for, to come do the sound. So it sounded amazing.
Part of their rider was that you had to supply them with dinner. And so we said, well, is it cool if we just cook you dinner? Assuming that probably everybody did that. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So they come over and we make soup and bake some bread. And they're like, you guys really have something special here. Nobody else has done this for us. It was kind of the high water mark because, you know, like they've traveled all over the world. They've seen what people do in this situation in every corner of the planet. And for them to come to us and look around and be like, you guys really have something special here. I don't think we knew until that moment that it was that unique. I think we assumed everybody who was old enough to sign a lease and had a little extra pocket money was probably pooling it with their friends and turning a warehouse into a venue, but it just wasn't the case.
It's not. You all should, here in Greensboro, should be really proud of this place, because I'll tell you right now, having traveled the Washington states, the United States of America, whatever they're called, there are not too many places like this that are as fucking cool and run by kids like yourselves or whatever, so you should appreciate it.
Was it a legal space, I guess?
No, it's not a legal space at all. We were not allowed to have assembly. That's the technical term for it here, is assembly.
Yeah, we didn't have an occupancy rating. We had literally hung carpet on the walls for soundproofing. You know, it wasn't a unsafe place, you know, but it wasn't up to city code.
We went around, did smart things, and did the fire extinguishers, and we had a good relationship with the police. They knew us by name because they'd get calls. I
had a way to get in touch with them through dispatch. I could go across the street, use a payphone, and call and get, what was his name? What was his, So they were cops that worked at district that knew us, and we always invited them in. Said, what's the problem, man? Come on in, check us out. you know where all the freaks are. If you got any problems, let it, you know, you come down here and ask one of these guys, we can probably help you.
The police would come and they would see us taking money at the door, and they would see us selling beer, and they'd say, "What's the cover?" They'd be in plain clothes. They'd say, "What's the cover?" And we'd say, "Oh, it's free, just taking donations for the bands." And they'd look in, they'd go, "I see you're selling beer." And no. Well, that guy just handed somebody a beer and they handed him money. So they're just tipping their bartender. Beer's free, come in if you want one.
Yeah, it's not like we're shooting heroin or anything, you know. We're, you know, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, you know.
Hey, Andy, what's going on out there?
There's a cop out there.
What is he doing?
He's talking to Brian.
About what?
Everything's under control.
The cops would come by all the time, but they never really shut us down. I thought that this was a mistake. Brian says he did it on purpose because it was time for the Miracle House to end.
So I made two things happen, getting us shut down. I kind of got frustrated because the Greensboro News and Record kept calling us for interviews, and I was getting frustrated with the different scenes going on and just some bullshit going on. So I said, "Fuck it, let's have an interview," knowing that it would draw unnecessary attention to us.
Bill Morris, a reporter from the Greensboro News and Record, interviewed Brian and Jonathan. He also went to the Fugazi show.
And then somebody from the city started like, "Who are these people? How are they getting, who's paying for their water? Let me see who's got their name on." Oh, well, that can't be because that person's been dead for 25 years.
Did you know how Brian was getting water into the place?
No, no, I don't know how he was getting water into the place.
I was piping in water. I'd bypassed the meter and was piping water directly. And it's not a lot of water. Come on, we're probably burning through 250 gallons of, you know, a year or something. I don't know.
The city heard, you know, finally got involved. So we tried to play ball and keep the space open and had the inspectors come in and say, "Give us a list." And then we were like, it was daunting the amount of money it would take to upgrade the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hey, we're not shut down, motherfuckers. We're just complying to restrictions. Yes. All the fables and myths that everybody is wow, this mic is hot. All the myths and fables that everybody's been saying is wrong. We will stay open. They can't lock the door, we'll cut the lock off. And if we can't do it here, we'll do it somewhere else. We have several options in our league. So just pay attention to the radio show on Tuesday, 5 to 6 on Wednesdays and Fridays, and we'll tell you what's going on with the Miracle House every time. That's right.
The Miracle House closed because the inspectors came in and they said, "You can't do any more shows here." Cops were just like, "Hey, I'm sorry, you know, guys." They knew us by name, but they put the sign, the condemn sign on there, and then we went, "You know what? Fuck you. All punk rock, we're gonna have a show." And we had a really big show. Cops showed up, they're like, "John, Brian, we gotta shut you down, man. We're sorry." And then this time they put a chain on it. So we were shut down and we didn't know what we were gonna do. And then somebody who I knew from art school who had money and hung out at the Miracle House came in and said, "Hey, I'd like to become a part of this. I'll give you the money to be legit."
We did the legal Miracle House, and that was funded by a guy who made money off the first Gulf War investing in Patriot missiles.
So I partnered up with him. We got a club that was really open, and we started doing shows there, and we were totally legit.
And that was great. We had some good bands come there.
I went to the place, hung out there, but really never I was out of it by then. That was John's baby.
Ultimately, it did end in an argument between John and the financier.
I got pissed at him.
And it was right before we were supposed to play with Helmet. I had even already made the flyer.
Basically, he sold the club to some other kids that opened it up as a club, and we went back to where the old original Miracle House was, but it's boarded up or locked up. We went next door to this place. It was called the Trim Shop. They used to put trim in cars.
It was a neon sign and it had automotive trim shop. So the automotive quit working and it just said Trim Shop. So we adopted that name and called it the Trim Shop. You know, it's the old Studebaker building here in Greensboro.
And it had a second story. You could drive up the ramp too. We put the stage up there, and we started doing it again.
So I don't even want to get into the whole Trim Shop thing. The Miracle House was more of, man, it had more soul. You know, it was more of a soulful commitment thing because we were living in the place. We played music. We were providing a place for a community of people to come and hang out and listen to good music, what we thought was good music. The trim shop, we just did it for damn fun, man. And we ran it like more like a business, where the Miracle House wasn't ran like a business.
To me, it was always a better space when it was underground because people felt more comfortable and like they were themselves. People behave differently, act differently in a public, legit space. That was just my observation.
Get crazy.
The dangerous part is you can get hurt and kill people.
We talk about the Miracle House days like it was the most important thing that happened in our life. And we look back on it, and it was really like about a year or 2 years long.
I'm almost tired of talking about it. I am tired of talking about it. People will come and reminisce about it, and I think it did have a fundament. And sometimes I'll get grumpy and go, look, why do we keep telling the same old stories? And they'll go, no, look, this changed this. I did this here. I met this person here. I never would have met that person there. I never would have been around this person. You know, somebody that was into the punk scene never would have gone to a show with this preppy person, and now they're married. You know, I know for a fact that people have told me things like that. And, you know, and if you look at the case of, like the guy said, Brian Huskey, who knows, maybe if we hadn't given him a shot to do his music and his comedy, maybe he would have taken a different path, you know? Mm-hmm. You know? You just can't tell.
Well, one of the things, you know, is we don't make decisions in hindsight, and I guess you're asking me now, thinking back on it, what would I do differently? Probably dedicated myself a little bit harder to it.
Brian was pivotal because he was really the genesis of it. I don't know if we would have had a warehouse space if it weren't for him having that space. And between the two of them, John in art school and Brian wrenching cars and climbing mountains, it was a perfect mix to make this happen.
I'd never stop thinking about doing DIY spaces. I continually to this day drive past the warehouse and think of its potential and what you could do. And I probably know how to do it right this time.
I mean, I could pull it off this now if I had the right space and the right, you know, if I was the right backer, just say, hey, here's some money, and get back with me in a year, you know?
But I'm tired, you know, and you just, when you get old, you get tired. And I've had other things happen in my life that haven't gone so well.
Too often people are like content to let their entertainment be packaged by people about 30 years older than them, so that you have to fucking look at repeats of the 1960s for the rest of your life. It's nice when kids take it in their own hands and do it for themselves so they can see some of their reflections.